If you are listening to this podcast, it means you're searching for someone who understands you, someone who gets you. You are yearning to be understood and to belong. Welcome to the Someone Gets Me podcast, where we help smart, talented, and sensitive people navigate an often insensitive world. I am Dianne A, your host. My roles as ambassador, author, speaker, and intuitive mentor for bright and talented people are woven into each episode. I have the experience and knowledge to educate and inspire, as I have been there and I understand your unique intensities, sensitivities, and challenges. Welcome. Accommodations that enhance innovative leadership. Hi friends, it's Dianne here today to talk about innovative leadership and the accommodations that are often needed for neurodiverse and twice exceptional leaders and their teams. There are accommodations that are very important to realize because people are not machines and it's not the same for everyone. It's important that we pay attention, right? Pay attention to what is happening. Pay attention to who our team is, whether our team is our group of friends, whether our team is our family, whether our team is a work group of any kind or a school study group of any kind. We come together in groups. We are mammals that we're meant to do that. And often there are accommodations that are really needed for the people who are twice exceptional, gifted, really smart, visionary, neurodiverse, because our processing is different. Our way of handling things is varied. So I want to talk about some things to consider when it comes to accommodations. And one of the things I know about myself and many of the people I've worked with is we have spent most of our life accommodating and tolerating things that don't work for us and working around it, finding workarounds. Sometimes being alone or lonely or feeling misunderstood, sometimes being really depressed, sometimes giving up, sometimes excelling beyond our wildest dreams by just going into our head and going, and then finally burning out. There's all kinds of ways that neurodiverse people have been accommodating a world that is not very accommodating and not very sensitive. My book, Someone Gets Me, How Intensely Sensitive People Can Make It in an Often Insensitive World, talks about some of these ideas. And so I want you to consider for a moment that if you're neurodiverse or you're gifted, or you might even be neurodiverse and gifted and not know it or not identify with those words, but often what you notice is you think differently than the people around you. Now that happens with me sometimes in my social circles. I have some friends of mine that I hang out with sometimes and we do activities and we go places and they do not think the way I think. And so I find myself sometimes, or I did years ago, changing the way I verbalized what I was thinking in order for them not to make fun of me or laugh. In fact, at one point many years ago, my good friend, then was my friend and now is a much better friend, a much closer friend. I said something out loud, I don't even remember, that I had remembered an event at the same place we were in Disney World from years before. And I brought it up. I just kind of said it out loud. It was one of those things where you're thinking out loud. And he patted me on the head and said, "Oh, you are so weird, Dianne." Now, this was 20 years ago, and I didn't know how to take that. But what he really meant was he was surprised I remembered it and that I even said it, right? And we've become very good friends since then. And what I realize is he is as neurodivergent as I am, but just different. He's gifted too, but it's different. And so he was being cute and I wasn't sure how to take it back then. So neurodivergent people, we think differently. We interact differently. And in between 2 or 3 or 4 different neurodivergent gifted people, there will be variance as well, because humans are all different. So when people ask me what I think about being neurodiverse, in a real simplistic level, we're all neurodiverse because no two of us are built the same. And then you add into it our autobiography and our experiences, and we're all different. Now, the term, as it's used in the world, generally speaking, means somebody who's either on the autism spectrum or has an ADHD situation or something where it is different from whatever is typical, in quotes, because typical, again, has a lot of variance. But we think differently, we process differently. Now, one is not better than the other. Some neurodivergent people process very slowly. I have a client that I work with that I present different ideas or offer feedback in a way, and I don't expect him to have any kind of comment about the feedback that I gave him until the next time I see him. Because he's going to go and ponder, he's going to go research, he's going to go think about it, he's going to maybe write or draw about it, but he's not going to have a response right away. And I don't expect him to, because from the very beginning, he taught me that he is one of those ponderer people. He will go think about it. I also have clients of mine and friends of mine as well that are very fast processors. So I might teach something new or ask a question to help them see a blind spot or something in our work together, and they will immediately process things and move forward with whatever the topic is. Both neurodiverse, both twice exceptional in the gifted world, but they process very differently. So if you're in a work team or a study team, right, or in your family and you've got multiple people and everybody does it differently, it's important to remember that not everybody thinks the way you do. Not everybody processes the way you do. Now, we live in a very self-centered world that basically implies that everybody should do it the way, each individual person does it, that the world is like us, but it's not the case. The real case is everybody does it differently. So pay attention to the fact that you think differently than other people, and other people think differently than you. And it's all okay. In fact, that's the value of a team. That's the value of having, that old phrase, two heads are better than one, right? That's the value in it. No two people do it exactly the same. Another thing to consider is that neurodiverse people are very good at identifying patterns and connecting data points. So if you're in a group and you need somebody to tell you what the pattern is, just ask your neurodivergent person friend. They'll be able to tell you the pattern of the poles along the sidewalk or the whatever it is. They'll be able to show you pattern in scientific data research. They'll be able to identify how data points come together over time. Now, some people are better at it than others, and a lot of people who are not neurodiverse don't really notice those things until they're pointed out. I notice patterns in just about everything, and I'll say something out loud sometimes when I'm with some of my friends who are neurotypical, and they'll go, "Oh, yeah. Oh, I see that now." But had I not pointed it out, they wouldn't have seen it, and nor would I expect them to necessarily. But when you're working with a group of people on a project, understand that the neurodiverse people will see patterns and how data points come together and put things and synthesize the information in a way that often is varied from the typical norm, which is part of the value, right? Now, also, neurodiverse people can be out of step or out of sync socially with the way they dress or how they say hello or their eye contact or their sense of humor. All of these things are part of a differently functioning brain from the perceived norm. So sometimes I have neurodiverse people that I kind of help them with social etiquette or social skill set or eye contact to remind them that in our culture, certain things are expected in a certain way. And if your brain's not thinking about those things, you may miss it. I kind of laugh because I know some people who are neurodiverse, and you can always tell the neurodiverse ones, and, some people call them the geeky ones, right? Because they don't dress like everyone around them. They're out of sync with it, maybe. Or they might be celebrating a holiday and everybody's wearing, outfits and things that go with that holiday. And your neurodiverse friend would be wearing some other random thing that has nothing to do with the holiday. They're still celebrating, but they didn't think about wearing clothes that would match. Is it wrong or right? It's neither, right? It's just a difference. And so we want to understand that accommodation sometimes for neurodivergent people, if you're their friend, is to remind them, okay, well, it's the 4th of July, wear red, white, and blue tomorrow. And they'll go, oh, I never thought of that. And they'll be really grateful that you, their friend, helped them out in a way that was safe and non-judgmental, because they don't think about those things typically, right? They think about other things typically. Or maybe you have a neurodivergent friend who is very introverted and therefore gets anxious walking into a social setting by themselves. You may want to offer to meet them there, so they're looking for someone that they know, or drive with them. You may want to offer, especially if you're an extrovert, to help break the ice a little bit for your neurodivergent friend. And if you're the neurodivergent introverted person, it's totally okay to ask for somebody's support or help, or suggest riding together, or suggest meeting each other there, so that there's a purpose and a mission, so that helps calm your own nervous system. Because social things can sometimes be tricky for everyone, but they're especially tricky if you're an introverted, neurodivergent person. And the last thing I want to really talk about when it comes to things to consider is that neurodivergent people are really good at masking, not showing you what's really happening with them, because again, they want to feel safe. And until they know they're safe, they're not going to let the guard down, or they'll be somehow stimulating themselves, whether it's doodling or writing or rubbing their fingers together, or bouncing their leg, or like holding their own hands or rubbing their fingers together. There's all kinds of ways that people can connect with having some kind of physical experience in the wake of whatever's happening. Again, accommodations for people who are doing that should be loving acceptance, right? As long as it's not harming themselves or somebody else, because that's what it takes to calm the nervous system, so that neurodivergent, gifted visionary can be the leader they're meant to be. So I want to talk about how innovation, leadership, and accommodations go together. Because it's really great to say, I'm neurodiverse, I need accommodations with test taking, or I need accommodations with blue screens, on my computer at work, or I need accommodations with all different kinds of things. That's great. But what I want to talk about is the second level, the second question underneath the accommodations of how does it feel to ask for an accommodation? How does it feel to put the risk out? How does it feel if you're the leader to know one of your people could really benefit from an accommodation, but they haven't asked for it yet, or maybe they're nervous or afraid to, and you're not really sure how to bring it up because you don't want to insult them or hurt their feelings? How do you do that as a leader? How do you do it when you're a person who's part of innovation and you want to have everyone in your group, including you, really be open and excelling, but yet there's these hesitant things because of either training or norms or whatever? So the first thing that I think is really important is to have clear, concise communication, because gifted people, neurodivergent people, work best when the communication is clear, concise, and specific. Innuendos, stories that have convoluted things that take a minute to figure out are not always the most effective way to get your message across in a business sense. I mean, I've had people try to tell me long stories before. I had this person working on my business, and she told me this long story one time. I don't even remember the whole thing, but it was a long story. And then later on down the road, I said something about the same topic. I go, how come you never told me that was an issue? She goes, I did. I told you a whole story about it. I go, oh, okay. So you told me a story about another person that was very vague in general, and you expected me to extrapolate that and apply it to me in my business without in any way putting those together. And I'm like, well, I just thought you were telling me a cool story about another person. And so I was listening to you with interest of conversation over dinner, not at all applying it to the business world. That was many, many years ago, and I can tell you that now I apply just about everything. But you want to have clear communication with each other, and that requires not triangulating, meaning going to one person to tell them to tell somebody else something, like, you're so-and-so's friend, so why don't you tell them this? Or why don't you help them with it? Triangulation is not healthy. And so I always tell my people, if you're caught in the middle, then get out of the middle. If somebody says he said, she said, I go, okay, well, let's put those two people together in the room and let's have a conversation about it. We'll try to understand what is needed or necessary to move the project or the team forward. Because triangulation leaves room, just like that old telephone game when you're a little kid, right? That what comes out at the end is not what went in the beginning. And so when we're triangulating, there's often interpretation and undisclosed motives and blind spots and all kinds of things that can color or distort what really needs to happen. We also, as innovative leaders, need to understand that one of our accommodations is to realize our trajectory to get things done is different. Timing for neurodiverse and twice exceptional people, especially visionaries, is not a linear straight line. Like, sometimes we spend a long time pondering something and thinking about something and then formulate the theory or the idea or the action steps needed to accomplish the thing. Other visionaries and in other situations might have an inspired idea or an intuitive hit, so to speak, and go, oh, it's this. And they'll be able to tell you exactly what to do and how to move forward very quickly. And sometimes those two examples of pondering and moving a little slower or coming up with something very quickly can happen in the same person at different times. So paying attention to timing and the trajectory really pays off. What I notice with the neurodivergent people I work with is I give them a sense of where we're headed. Okay, like, these assignments we're doing, this work we're doing is heading us to this place. Then, first of all, they're going to do the assignments more because they know where they're going. And second of all, if they have an epiphany or an understanding about where we're going that changes our trajectory, it's easier for them to communicate that. So our work together becomes much more effective and much more efficient and much more timely because we're communicating in a way that understands trajectory changes, timing changes, and it's not typical. I don't have anybody that I work with, and that even includes me, where our timing looks like what other people think it should be. Most of us are time optimists. I have one client of mine who is in a senior management role, and she has a very large team underneath her. And she takes a lot of direction from the C-suite people in the company. And what happens is they ask her to do things, and because she is so gifted, she can get it done very quickly. Well, she started training everybody over the decades. She's worked there for a long, long time, that she can do everything twice as fast as anybody else. So it kind of spoiled the CEO. So part of her setting boundaries and part of her communicating and paying attention to timing is allowing herself to not put the pressure on herself to get everything done so fast, that it doesn't have to be always in a hurry, and that she can do her own pace in her own way without the pressure. And so she doesn't burn out. And it's really working. It's very effective as I was teaching her how to honor her neurodivergence, honor her innovative leadership, both with receiving direction and also with communicating with her team. How do we do that? There's lots of nuance and lots of specifics that go with each situation. But I think it's very important to realize that we need accommodations. I know one of the accommodations I always tell people that I'm working with is clear, concise communication. If you say A, mean A, right? If there is a qualifier, add the qualifier. Because when I'm listening to somebody, especially if I'm taking directions, I listen with precision to that. And so it's important that if you're going to give me directions for something like my social media people or other people that I work with, right? If they say, oh, do it whenever you want to, or say whatever you want, that's going to be different than, well, these are the topics that really are effective right now. Let's focus on these. The clearer, the more precise the information and the direction, the better your innovative leaders can go. Now, also, they're not going to do it at the pace you think. It's not possible because everybody does it differently. So if you're an innovative leader and you have a team, they're not going to do it like you are. They're just not. So part of getting to know people, part of running a team or being part of a team or being the leader is understanding, identifying, and appreciating each person's unique way of getting the job done. And no two people are going to do it exactly the same. There might be similarities, but not exact. So you, the leader, who are an innovator, who's a visionary, it's important that you really learn how to deeply listen and pay attention to the people that you're serving, the people who are working with you. And notice I said you as a leader are serving the people because that's what a leadership role is. It's one of service. And if you're on the team and you have a leader who is unconscious to visionaries and neurodiverse people, then you know, it's a chance to educate them, right? It's a chance maybe to share information or share this podcast to help people see that neurodiverse people bring an abundance of amazing things to the table. And sometimes you're misunderstood or it's not understood. I have one client who was working at a place and the biggest frustration she had was that they couldn't see her real value and her real gifts. And so they were not paying attention to it. And they were, acting as if she could do way less than she can, right? And so she wanted to bring all her gifts to the table, but they couldn't see it. And so we had to talk about how to communicate that and how to let go of attachment to the outcome. That most people out there cannot see all of our own gifts, of other people because they're not paying attention or they're not trying to, or they have a singleness of purpose and the extra gifts are great, but they're not part of the mission. Again, there's no one story, right? There's no one way to do it. And part of the situation for her is that she has gifts that are outside the scope of what she was doing at work. And so we worked on ways to feel fulfilled in those other areas in a different scope so that it wouldn't come out as frustration at work. Now, this strategy worked really well. And this person began excelling even more in other areas of her life because she could have her energy and her time and her attention focused properly with healthy boundaries. So accommodations require understanding timing and understanding we all have different timing and being flexible with that. Then they mean having good boundaries, knowing how much of yourself to bring to the table, knowing how close to let people near you, knowing what the rules are, so to speak, in a situation. If you need something done by a certain time, make that clear. If you want it done by a certain time and there'll be a consequence if it's not, then help the person with transitions, remind them, right, when it's coming close or something like that, so that everybody's on the same page. That communication, being clear and precise, is very important. And understanding that people who are innovative leaders, people who are neurodivergent, people who are visionaries have a different trajectory of things. They're either moving faster or maybe slower, or then slower, then faster. It's all different kinds of trajectories. Some people I know are very circular in their way, but they get it done. Other people are more a line item Excel spreadsheet kind of way, but they still get whatever the task is done. So the key is for you, the leader, to understand that accommodations are really needed for everyone, including you. So as a leader, part of your communication is to be clear and precise with your team about how to interact with you, what works best, and ways they can expect that you will respond to them. Because when your team knows the rules, it's much easier to get things accomplished in a way that works for everybody. So remember, no two people do life the same. No two people process the same. No two people have the same neurology and sensitivities and insights and awarenesses. And we all have different autobiographies. And so therefore, no two people do anything the same, including their work. So at work, understand this. Pay attention to looking beyond the facade to the person underneath there. Both management to employee and employee to management, or employee to employee, right? All people that I've ever met are just trying to make it, figure out life, as life is very, very interesting and can take lots of twists and turns. And we can have joy and sorrow all at the same time. There's so many things happening in people's worlds outside of their work. Same thing in a family situation. We can all come home at the same time, and everybody has had events that day that have either triggered greatness or joy or happiness or sadness or all the above, or nothing at all. Kind of flat. But still, we want to be clear and communicate in a way and understand that boundaries are essential. Understanding how much of you to bring to the table is very valuable. And moving into a more accommodating way, a more accommodating strategy, a more accommodating mindset, knowing that accommodating each other is an honor. It's a gift we get to give somebody. It's not because they're less than or there's something wrong with them. We accommodate ourselves and others because we have deep appreciation for the value of each human being and what they bring to the table, no matter what kind of table it is. So if you want to talk about this more with me, please make a get to know you call and schedule that. I'd love to do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My link is in the show notes, of course. And I'm always happy to answer your emails, answer your questions, or just simply have some tea over these great topics, because I think we all are valuable. And I think we all have something really amazing to bring to the world. And I think the key is having safety and giving ourselves permission to show up in our own sovereignty with our gifts alive and well in a way that works with healthy boundaries. So remember, friends, to put your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. And so go out there and let your light shine. Have healthy boundaries and communicate your needs clearly. Give yourself permission to be all you're meant to be in a safe, effective, and happy way. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne saying, be well. Are you tired of searching for someone to understand you? Join our Facebook group, Someone Gets Me. In this group, you will be able to connect with others who are intense, sensitive, smart, and talented. I share my insights and teachings, and you can connect with others in a real, authentic, safe forum. So join us today. Someone Gets Me.